Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Makers Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Makers Show. And today I'm joined by Frank. Frank, can you please introduce yourself and share a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate the time. My name is Frank Weishaupt. I'm the CEO of a company called Owl Labs. Owl Labs is a company that provides essentially hardware to make hybrid work. So we know that 100% of people are no longer in the office at all times, and it's important that we connect the bridge between those in-office participants to those remote participants. And we provide the hardware that provides, the ability for the remote participant to be an active participant in the conversation with video collaboration hardware.
Yeah, it's very valuable. With hybrid meetings, I've helped 25 organizations by now figure out their hybrid work strategy, return to work strategy. And hybrid meetings have been a huge challenge. And I've definitely been recommending Owl Labs as the video camera. I think you have the third version right now, the 361,
Yeah.
as a much more affordable version than like wiring up a room that can cost in the many dozens of thousands and even hundreds of thousands. Like you can wire up a number of Owl Labs. So let's talk a little bit about hybrid meetings. What do you see as the best practices for hybrid meetings?
Yeah, so I think we've had it's been a long and windy road to get to where we are now. And I think, office participation has been the biggest wild card there. When we all kind of scattered to our homes in 2020 and we started to use Zoom and Microsoft Teams on a daily basis from our homes, it was very much like it is right now. You and I are on equal footing. I'm in my box, you're in your box. We connected very easily. And, we're having a very natural conversation right now. I think where it gets more challenging is when you start to have more participants that are in a conference room while you have some participants that are still remaining at home. So, in general, when you think about the world before the pandemic, that remote participant was always an afterthought, right? And, if we're going to a world where we're going to make hybrid work, and remote work is going to be a real thing, which it is at a much greater scale today, it's important that those people that are remote are not an afterthought. They have to be active participants in a meeting. And so the video collaboration hardware and software really makes a big difference, because if you're used to the traditional view of just looking at a conference room like a bowling alley, and then you're on the TV on the wall, there's no active conversation happening there where it's natural. Where we come into play, and I think where most hardware collaborators come into play, is we're trying to provide the angles that give you the opportunity to still have that same experience that you and I are having right now, which is more akin to what you were used to at the start of the pandemic. So, I still think it's a very confusing time. If you look globally at conference rooms and huddle spaces around the world, less than 10% of them are still wired for video. Yeah. And we have companies that are all over the place with their return to work strategy and return to office strategy. So a lot of the story is yet to be written.
I think so too. And one of the benefits that I've seen with my clients using the Owl Lab 360-degree camera is that you can both see the people in the room. You can focus on the person who's speaking, but you can also see all the other people in the room and the reactions to this person. And I think this is kind of a big part of what the remote meeting participants have been missing when you just have a video camera that's located at one end of the room and it's just pointing generally at the people. It's hard to make out who's speaking. It's hard to make out their facial features or the tone. And it's also hard to make out how other people respond to this person. So can you tell me a little bit more about what your thoughts are regarding these benefits of focusing on the person, but also being able to observe other people's responses?
Yeah, so I think, when you look at the history of Owl Labs, the one thing that we've always been, our flagship product is the Meeting Owl. And one thing that we've always made sure that we gave is full perspective in the room. So we have a panoramic strip up top that shows the whole room, because without that perspective, I think you lose a lot of the pieces of it. We have a saying at Owl, which is, every room needs to be wired for video and every angle needs to be covered. So we actually recently released a front of the room bar that wirelessly pairs to the center of the table, because if you happen to be not facing the television and all of a sudden you're seeing me like this, then you're not an active participant. So what we're trying to do is really cover the room with the ability to give the angle that you are able to really not only hear me effectively, but see me effectively, and really be able to kind of read me almost as though you are an active participant in the room. So we think that it has there's still a long way to go here, right? I think as you covered in the beginning, everybody has to be able to use this equipment. Everybody has to be able to start a meeting on time, right? You don't want to have all those taxes in between, and you also don't want to have to be an IT professional in order to make every meeting work. And that's really at the core what we're trying to accomplish is, we're just trying to, as we, continue on this path towards figuring out what that right option is for returning to work, making sure that, people can walk into a conference room, flip something on, and then everybody, whether you're in the room or remote in a different country, and no matter where you are, you can, participate in the same equal footing, right? This is all, we live in a world of equality now. And, I think when you look at companies thinking about their return to work strategy, their number one thing in their mind has to be, how am I supporting everyone?
Yeah.
Right? Because you can't just think about that group that's in the office, because then that's a bias. And then that's also, leaning towards making those people more productive than the rest of your company. So, you really need to take a holistic view on it. And technology is without question a big part of it, as we've all found out through this process over the last 4 years.
Absolutely. Now, I think it's not necessarily so simple as like using technology and flipping it on, because what I find is that even with the meeting owl, you still have to train people to use it effectively, and you still have to train people to relate, especially the people who are in the room. You still have to train them on how to relate effectively to the people who are coming in remotely, who are remote participants, because they're obviously not there. And you can still be left out even if you're seeing other people. So what do you find about the hybrid, so to speak, of the technology and the training of how do you actually get people to be effective participants in the meeting when they are located in the room, even with the benefit of the meeting owl?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point that you bring up, because the planning part of making this all work is something that I think has been lost on people, right? I think as I said, companies have to be thinking about all of the people in their organization, whether they be remote, whether they be hybrid, or whether they be in office. Usually when we've seen multiple different versions of this, right? We've seen people scrambling for a solution, and then we've seen people with a well thought out solution.
Yep. And
we try to make the device as simple as use as possible. It's USB plug and play. It's if you're on Zoom like we are now, you simply pick it as the device, right? It's your camera, your speaker, and your microphone all in one. And it really gives you the opportunity to just present yourself differently. But you're right. There's taxes that come with everything, which is, if you walked into the room for the first time as an employee, it may be fine for me who's planning this for my organization, but if you walk in the first time as an employee, it can be intimidating. Sure. You don't know if you're plugging in USB-C and your entire screen is going to be up there, or there might be other vulnerabilities that you're bringing to the organization. So we certainly consider ours to be something that can be set up without the help of IT, but you still need to train your organization on not only why you're using this technology, but why it's important that the technology be used to enable the value for those remote participants. Because I remember back, as you say, back in the day, you really mean pre-2020.
Yeah.
But if you had technology issues, you would abandon the remote people completely. Right. And we just don't live in that world anymore, right? Everybody needs to be a part of every conversation, if you're invited to the table. And ease of use technology is an important part of it. And we kind of put ourselves in that category on the easy side, but the organizations still need to invest.
They do. And what I've been finding is that the most resistance tends to come from people in managerial positions. And I think because they've been successful in the company for 20, 30 years and been in leadership, executive positions, so that tends to be really challenging. So when like I said, I consult, and so I come into the company for important meetings, like fly in, but most of my meetings I'm present virtually with a leader, with the board in the boardroom, and lots of leaders don't really know how to use the tech very well, and so it's a kind of a, I think, much less so than a lot of their staffers. And they're kind of embarrassed, I think, to also get IT support for helping them with using tech. So that, I think, is a challenge. And I think even looking at all of these return to office mandates, a significant proportion of them is because leaders aren't comfortable with remote interactions. They really want people in the office. They're comfortable with management by walking around and seeing people and having this visibility. So what are your thoughts about the leadership, top level, mid-level manager resistance to using technology for remote interactions? And what do you think will happen there?
Yeah, I think, if you actually look at our buying history, like where we sort of grew up and really became valuable was within that. I wouldn't call it that upper level management, but I would call it department heads. Mm-hmm. So we have over 175,000 organizations using our product globally, and what would happen is that department heads would get frustrated with not having a solution or having a solution that was too difficult to use, because there are really complicated systems out there where you do require IT to get meetings started. And so that kind of department head was willing to go online, get something that they could put on their purchase card to solve a problem that they have, and then just plug it in and start using it. I think you bring up a lot of good points as it relates to upper management. You bring up a lot of good points as it relates to in-office participation, which is these constant reminders of in the news about companies that are kind of mandating a return to office. And I think people need to, at the upper management level, need to really understand, first of all, why they're doing that, and then second, how they're going to bridge the gap for those days where that's not the case, right? It seems to be the executive leadership at companies are falling into this pattern of Tuesday through Thursday in the office and Monday and Friday at home. Does that mean that you trust your employees more on Mondays and Fridays than you do on Tuesday through Thursday? I think we have a little bit of friction of trust between leadership and employees, and we actually do this state of remote work every year as a report where we interview thousands of employees and get their perspectives on things, and people are willing to take a pay cut for flexibility. So they're going to want flexibility. If you're a company that's going to do well, you're going to need to provide flexibility. And then in order to bridge the gap and maintain productivity, you're going to have to adopt technology. And I think people are searching for answers there. And I do think that, listen, executive leadership, if you get in a meeting with 20 people and you're the CEO of the company, you don't want to look foolish and not be able to use the technology.
Exactly.
Right. So, but people have to let their vulnerabilities go here, because we are in a new era. I mean, these are 10 years ago. I don't think you and I would have sat here and said we'd be having this discussion today about this, the return to office mandates, the productivity of employees that are home, and the fact that people still want that flexibility, because we're now in an era of task-based work, right? I do not need to go to a traditional office from 8 to 6 to prove my value. I need to go into the office when there are tasks in the office that are supported by that environment. Right? If I am working on a presentation by myself tomorrow, I don't need to drive 2 hours to get into an office and spend another $50 out of my pocket versus, being able to do that work at home. So there's just I think your original question kind of spoke to how do leaders adopt technology, but I think it's a much greater story here where we need to answer a lot of questions.
Yeah, no, and I think that makes the future really an interesting dynamic. What do you think will happen in the future with these return to office mandates as we wrap up the conversation?
Yeah, to me, this is Owl Labs is a company that has we've been remote from the beginning. So we're willing to hire employees that can do the job no matter where they are. It works out to roughly 50-50. 50% of the people are within a geographical area of our corporate headquarters in Boston. And then we have 50% that are remote. And I think, being able to measure productivity of employees, create a culture that is hybrid and or with some remote employees are the keys here. Because if I have, let's just take an example. If I have an employee that is responsible for managing a budget of something, I have a quantifiable way to be able to measure their productivity over time. What do I care where they are? If they can do their job from somewhere else, that makes them a happier employee. It makes them a more well-adjusted employee. I have no issue with it. So I think their return to office mandates are interesting because it's a question of, is it global economic pressures on the business that are making you feel like you're less productive than you were? Because I have the studies. 2 years ago, you told me that you were just as productive when you were remote as when you were in the office. So, the way that I think this winds up playing out is, if you want the best and most engaged workforce, you're going to provide flexibility. Doesn't mean that the office doesn't play a role. Maybe it's a smaller office. Maybe it's an office that has different, facilities than it does today, with different types of, meeting spaces and things that employees need. But it's going to play out where the employers are going to win on this one, and there's going to be hybrid is going to be the key to the future of companies, and people need to start embracing that versus forcing something down an employee's throat.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Well, thank you for sharing your expertise, Frank. That was very helpful.
Thank you, Doctor. I appreciate the time.
And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Makers Show. Please subscribe wherever you checked out the show and leave a review. It helps others discover the show and helps us improve the show.